Welcome. My name is Colleen Laughlin, and I am the Executive Director and Designated Federal Officer for the Defense Innovation Board. Today's meeting is being recorded and live streamed to allow members of the public to attend the meeting virtually. Thank you to the Defense Media Activity for providing their expert support to this event, and thank you to my team for all your help. Welcome to our attendees in this virtual environment. The board will now convene its public session. This meeting has been notified in the Federal Register notice on September 8th, 2020. The public was invited to submit written comments for the board. We received a number of comments and will post those online within minutes of the meeting. And with that, we will go ahead and begin with our attendees here today. We have here with us Mark Sarangelo, Eric Schmidt, Missy Cummings, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Kurt Delbene, Drew Endy, Adam Grant, Danny Hillis, Marnie Levine, Michael McQuaid, Richard Murray, Milo Medine, Jennifer Polka, Daniela Roos, and Eric Lander. With that, we will kick off the meeting and the board's agenda. Mark, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Colleen, and welcome everyone. We really appreciate you joining us today and spending some time with the Defense Innovation Board. It is a different format as we've all lived our life. This is our first virtual meeting since we last met, now back in March. It seems it was about 10 years ago. We have a great group of people who are joining us today, people from startups, people from in the investment world, from the military and civilian government world, and all sorts of technologists. And it's really a terrific community, and we appreciate all the thoughts and comments that you all have made. Certainly a lot has transpired since March, since we've been together. This spring, the DIB has turned 4 years old. The Defense Innovation Board was stood up in 2016. And we've done, I think, certainly from the 4 years of work, a significant amount of activities have gone on by us, and certainly with us working with the different parts of the DoD. And it's also been, while this is a time for us to stop and recognize and remember, it's also a time for us to say thank you. The DIB members and all of us who you see on the website and who are part of this call, we're all volunteers, and our terms are generally a 4-year term. We have a number of people who are coming off after spending 4 years of their time. And I have to say, I mean, it's been, not only is it 4 years of time, but an amazing amount of work has gone on. But all these people from the very beginning have had to start up this new board. It's not like we've walked into a board that was already organized. And I just want to take a moment to recognize some of the people who have given their time as they come off as their term ends. It has really been my pleasure in my last 2 years to spend time with these people. They've made me infinitely better in what I do, and certainly have contributed to the board. I want to start by saying thank you to Adam Grant, who's really been working terrifically behind the scenes and in the committees to do work around our workforce committee. Eric Lander, who has been and is a leading innovation person in the world of biology and genetics, and who's been a terrific part of our Joint Pathology Center and the work that we've done to do research there. Marnie Levine, who's been is a tech policy maker, both in government and private sector, and really has brought a tremendous understanding of that and an understanding of people to the board. Jen Palka, who's been an outstanding colleague and friend of ours and friend of mine, is a former founder of executive director for Code for America, and was also leading the U.S. Digital Service in her time. We also had two other people who have transitioned off recently, Reid Hoffman and Walter Isaacson, both of whom really made a tremendous part, were a tremendous part of this board and made a tremendous difference in what we're doing. I want to also recognize the first of the new additions who's come on board here, Dr. Drew Endy, who's joined us. He's a terrific, innovative thinker and a professor of bioengineering at Stanford. Welcome, Drew, and we look forward to your 4 years of time together. And finally, before we get into the meeting, I want to say a few words about Eric Schmidt. Eric has been the chairman for the last 4 years, and certainly has not only performed amazingly as chairman, but I think one of the things we don't realize is how difficult it is to do all the things that we do in our other outside lives and still come together in a board like this. But Eric has taken that to a different level. He has led as the first chairman in this board, helped form it, helped organize it, helped really set the tone for what we're doing and how we're moving forward. And on a personal level, he's been a terrific friend and mentor to me. So Eric, as we move on and before we get into the meeting, I wanted to turn it over to you and just see if you might have a few words for the group.
Well, first, thank you, Mark. Let me say for the folks who've ending their 4-year terms, it has been fantastic to work with you. When I think about the board, I think about our accomplishments, but I also think of the fun, and in particular, the fun that we've had together, and fun in the sense of meaningful fun, learning, changing the world, having an impact. When we started this a bit more than 4 years ago, I had no idea that the DIB would be as impactful or as successful as it has come to be. I figured that we would make recommendations and that nobody would particularly listen. But we did something different from other boards. We adopted a sort of a more of a contact sport view. And what we did is we developed relationships within the DoD with key decision makers. And we said, we serve you, right? We are a FACA committee. We don't make any decisions, but we're here to help you. And the result of that was, by virtue of very hard work from leaders in the DoD, things like the JAIC, the software strategies, the AI and ethics work, and so forth, much of which will be previewed here today. My point here is that when you look at the list of accomplishments over 4 years, it's really quite startling for a volunteer advisory committee. For me personally, I want to say that one of the best things that we did was bring Mark on. I worked with him very closely, and when it was time for a new chairman, Mark was the obvious and excellent choice. And I think we've seen that navigating through the pandemic and all the internal problems. So I can say that Mark has my complete and total support, and I know he has the support of the rest of the board in getting us to the next level. So with that, I say thank you all. It has been a real privilege and an honor to serve both the government, the country, and I say, if you're going to serve with people, serve with these people. So thank you all. Thank you, Mark. You have our undying support and commitment to both the principles of the DIB and to your leadership going forward. Thank you very much.
Eric, we wish we could clap, and we'll do it in the background here. But thank you for everything you've done, and we certainly will always be remembered as the foundational part of what we've done here in the DIB. Before we get into the meeting, I wanted to take just a couple moments to reflect on the situation and where we've been. As we're preparing for this meeting, we had to think back and say it's only been 6 months since March when we last got together in Austin. It's hard to imagine how much the world has changed around us, and really the importance of innovation. Innovation has been looked at in many different ways, but we're seeing it clearly, even doing the call that we're doing today, which would probably not been something we would have chosen to do in the past. It takes a lot of work, a lot of effort. But the reason for the Defense Innovation Board is to be able to stand up and support the department, not only in the things that we plan for, but also in the things that come up that aren't planned for. And being able to adapt and being able to be supportive of the department in not only in its technical ways, but it's also as part of the humane way that we're trying to move forward in all the different problems that we have. It's really been a challenge, but also a challenge that I think we've all stood up for. And it really, for us, gives us the importance of why we're spending our time here. We saw major changes across the DoD. The DoD has accelerated and is trying to accelerate what they're doing in digital modernization. And we're trying to help build on that. We're also trying to adopt the commercial solutions that we see in many of our organizations in past lives and helping to bring best practices to the DoD. We saw major organizational changes going on, and I think probably the biggest and the most visible of them has been the stand-up of the U.S. Space Force. That has taken, I think it has happened in record time from when it was first discussed to now being stood up under the leadership of General Raymond. It really has been amazing to watch, and seeing the U.S. government for the first time in, I think, almost 70 years, or more than 70 years, stand up and do something different and adopt to what's really necessary by saying we're going to have so much activity in space, we need to have a dedicated group of people around that. And that has now stood up, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later. Just yesterday, we heard from Secretary Barrett, Air Force Secretary Barrett, about the importance of the space domain and its dominance and our need as a country to be part of that. This morning, we heard from blazing leaders like General Raymond, who is now the Chief of Space Operations. He's turned over Space Command, and other leaders on the critical, necessary, and really vital need for the Space Force. And we're certainly looking forward to being part of that as we go forward with the Defense Innovation Board. Last week at the DoD AI Symposium, we heard the same message from a number of senior DoD leaders about the need to be more agile, need to accelerate AI, need to really focus in on people, not just the people that we have and their welfare and their well-being, but also how do we attract and retain the best possible people into the department and make sure that they have a long career path in what they're doing. Secretary Esper has certainly promoted innovation in the department. He's been a terrific support, along with Deputy Secretary Norquist of the Defense Innovation Board and Innovation Thinking. And we wanted to say thank you for all the work that's been done there and for your guidance and support of what we're doing as a group. Over the past 4 years, we've been privileged, and I've been personally privileged to have the support of Dr. Michael Griffin and Dr. Lisa Porter, both of whom were the leadership of research and engineering in the department. Both Dr. Griffin and Dr. Porter recently left, but as they have left, they've left a long trail of success behind them, and certainly in the stand-up of the Defense Innovation Board and the work that we've been doing, we wanted to say thank you for helping us and guiding us through the really critical startup years and being an amazing support to us as we move forward. We now have a new Undersecretary for Research and Engineering, Mr. Michael Kratsios, and Michael is going to be joining us later. He's going to be speaking about his new mission and what he's doing, and we're really looking forward to hearing his words. Michael and I have spoken many times and gotten off to a terrific start, I believe, and he has, again, reiterated and expressed and supported the need for this type of activity and innovation within the department. We continue, as we look around the department, to hear voices really speaking up about innovation. Besides General Raymond, we've heard Will Roper, Dana Deasy, General Hyten, and many others really talk about innovation and partnership being the lead. And I think from my perspective, it's not just talk, it's really reaching out and trying to do things differently, trying to make things a different world for the department. You know, it's really interesting in these times as we move forward that as difficult as they are, we can see, if you look, and it is around us, that there are silver linings to be found. This is an opportunity. People are, I think, far more open to looking at new ways of doing things. And as challenging as our world has become, I think it's also opened up amazing paths for innovation, and we certainly want to continue to be supportive of that. As we look back on the past year or two for the DIB, we certainly have seen a number of major efforts that we've tried to contribute to. Progress in 5G, predictive medicine, AI principles, and ethics. These have been areas where we've been asked to look at and produced, we think, really seminal background information, reports, and recommendations as to how we might move forward. Innovation is happening all over the DoD, and we're very proud to be part of it. And I want to just say personally, thank you to all the board members here. Many of you who are watching this don't realize the amount of time and commitment that's done by these people. And as the new chair, I am certainly fortunate to have walked into an amazing board of not just innovators and thinkers, but friends and people who care deeply about what's going on. And I am privileged to be in this role for as long as I will be. And I certainly am looking forward to working with this group of people and all the new people that we'll be adding on. With that, I'd like to begin our subcommittee work, and I'd like to turn it over to the DIB Science and Technology Subcommittee Co-Chair, Michael McQuaid. Mike?
Hi, everybody. Sound check, everybody hear me okay? Yep, okay, great. So thanks, everybody. We're going to talk a couple of things from the Science and Technology Committee today. We have one topic that we're going to actually deliberate on and two topics that you're going to get sort of work in process. I'll jointly present on the subject around AI test evaluation, V&V. That's going to be more of a discussion. You're going to get a little bit of sausage making as we go along, and my colleagues and I will we'll have some of that open discussion that we have done in the past. And then my co-chair, Richard Murray, is going to talk about two other subjects. One is the broad area of digital engineering, and we'll talk about what that means in the context of moving forward with efficiency and effectivity and progress and speed and all those other adjectives that we use to describe the DIB's view on innovation. And then we'll talk about an update on the so-called sections 231 and 862. These were requirements in last year's NDAA that were given to us on behalf of the work we did on the software acquisitions and practices work. So Richard will lead both of those conversations. So let me start with AI test and evaluation and VNV. So for the audience, let me position this as what you're going to see is some early thinking and early sort of trying to reach a definition of what we actually want to say. So by virtue of, or by way of background, TEV&V for AI is a subject that has been part of our conversation from the beginning. If you go back, we're also reminiscing here, but some of the very first work we did 4 years ago had to do with workforce and importance of software and importance of AI in the department. And so that theme of what these things are and how they matter at the people level and at the operational level has been something that's been on our plate for a long time. Last year, we had a year's worth of work that culminated in the AI ethics principles that were voted out by this organization. And that was a charge given to us by the secretary to understand what does AI present to the department in the way of ethics? Is it anything new under the sun? Are the ethical principles under which the department always operates relevant? And if they are insufficient, what else should we be thinking about? We delivered 5 principles out, last year, and we are extraordinarily gratified at the legs that those have gotten over the last 9 months, both in the way the department has responded and put in place process and procedures and methodology and commitments. And we're also quite pleased with the way it's been communicated and integrated into discussions with allies and like-minded partners around the world. So we're very pleased with that and very, very proud of the work we've done, but mostly proud of how the department has responded. For those of you who remember, in addition to the 5 recommended ethical principles we laid out, we also laid out a number of recommendations for things the department should be doing relative to its continued work on how ethics and AI fit. One of those recommendations had to do with the whole issue around how do you know it's doing what it's going to do? We have AI systems. We've convinced ourselves that they are the same as software in a lot of ways, and they are different in a lot of ways. And the whole issue around how I can say what about the performance of the system, how I can determine that I have control over the performance of the system, they're all very complicated. And one of our recommendations from last year was that the department needed to organize its efforts around ensuring that it had the technology, the discipline, the understanding of what it meant to be able to do test, evaluation, validation, and verification for AI systems along the way. Mark mentioned Undersecretary Griffin, who was our sponsor champion for until his recent move. And he was very forceful to us that this was a topic that he really needed the DIB to help catalyze thinking. And so we have begun the process of, and as typical of what we do at the DIB, we've begun the process of saying, what is it we actually want to say about this topic? That means an understanding of how we think about the topic of validation and verification and test and evaluation for AI systems. But it also means, how is the rest of the world thinking about this? Part of what, as Mark so eloquently said, part of what we all bring are external perspectives, and there are a lot of people besides the Department of Defense doing AI systems, and being able to bring those voices into the mix is a part of what we are trying to understand. And so we have begun the process of speaking to participants in the department. We've begun the process of speaking to academics. We've begun the process of speaking to external stakeholders, external participants, et cetera. And so we have a team, and you're going to hear from us today. So my colleagues here, Missy Cummings, Daniela Roos, Richard Murray, and Danny Hillis. I think we're going to give you a little bit of discussion, and then all of the rest of our colleagues, as is usual, will jump in where they have something to go. So let me start there. And Danielle, I'm going to call on you first to maybe just talk a little bit, given both your view into the department and also your view from where you are in academia at MIT. Can you talk a little bit about just why this is such an important topic for us? I think you're mute, Danielle. There we go.
Absolutely. Thank you, Michael, and thank you for that overview. Hello, everyone. So let me start by underscoring what Michael said, the possibility of using AI technologies in many applications in the DoD, but also with broader societal and this industrial impact is tremendous. There are so many opportunities that come from our ability to process a lot of data, to find patterns in data, to make recommendations, to make predictions for what might happen, and to make suggestions for what we should do. And so we have a long report on AI principles that explains some of the background, and I don't think we need to emphasize too much about the importance of AI because we are on board. Now, in order to use and deploy AI systems, it is critical to have procedures for testing, evaluation, validation, and verification. And this is because without assurance that these systems perform correctly, we will not have confidence in their performance, and ultimately they may not be deployed. And so it's important to focus on this part of the AI system. And so we may ask, well, why is this different? Haven't we been developing procedures for testing software for decades now? Can't we just adopt those procedures? And the answer is no, because I mean, in some sense, traditional software is deeply different than AI machine learning software. So if you think about it, in a traditional piece of software, we get some data and we have some logic we want to test, and we want to, and out of this, we get a desired behavior from the system. Machine learning does things in some sense the other way around. So in machine learning, we get some data and desired behavior, and we expect to produce logic. And that means that we have to validate, test, and verify these systems in a different way. This procedure of testing, validation, verification, evaluation is critical because without carefully characterizing what we are going to get from these systems, we will not be assured that these systems are doing what they're supposed to be doing, that these systems will produce the results we need. And this is actually critically important. AI systems depend on data, and so their performance is only as good as the data used to train them. And so in this respect, we have to focus both on how we train the systems and how we test the models that come out as a result of running the systems. In order, there are many challenges that are rooted on the fact that these systems use data, that the fact that these systems are usually massive networks that involve lots of little solution, that these systems have to have certain properties in terms of how we can explain them to the world, in terms of how we can certify their behavior, how we can characterize their confidence, and without a systematic approach to all of these topics, we are in danger of not being able to safely deploy the systems. So testing, evaluation, verification, and validation is truly critical to creating deployable systems that will support the department with important applications. And the department has been articulating the importance of accelerating the deployment of these systems. We have seen the adoption of the AI principles in the department. SecDef signed a set of AI principles that is very similar to what we have proposed as a group. We have seen communications from the JAIC. We have seen a lot of efforts in developing AI accelerator programs that will take the latest and greatest advancements in AI from research organizations and map them into processes and procedures for the department. We hope to have these in place, but in order to get there, we need to have rigorous, robust procedures for testing.
Thanks, Daniela. Thanks for grounding us a bit here. And I'm going to sort of follow that theme for just a little bit, and I'm going to ask Missy here. For those of you who don't know, Missy brings a couple different things to this conversation. She brings a deep academic background in autonomous and AI-driven systems, but she also brings a practitioner's background, given the work that she's done for many years, particularly with the Department of Defense. So, Missy, can you want to talk a little bit about some of the conversation we had and that you led around sort of what makes these systems complicated and what makes it sort of complicated to even think about how we test and validate?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it is the nature of uncertainty that makes these systems complicated. And uncertainty can come from many sources. Uncertainty can come from the environment. Uncertainty can come from humans in and around the system. And I think the real question in AI test and evaluation, verification and validation is trying to get at how can we characterize that uncertainty and how can we test to make sure that the systems operate, I would say, good enough. So what does that mean? You know, you can never guarantee perfect safety really in any system, and it's certainly going to be complicated for systems with embedded AI. But we need to get to a level of, I would say, trust, and I think that this is difficult. When, you know, we could argue that pilots are autonomous systems, yet we trust them to fly us around in commercial aircraft, particularly pre-COVID. We trust them by having a 1-hour check ride in a simulator. And somehow we agree that these autonomous agents with some minimal level of testing makes us feel comfortable that these persons are safe enough to fly with. And I think that that is actually the very difficult problem that we have going forward in the future, is determining what is safe enough. And I'll tell you, just as an academic who personally, I've been working with the Department of Transportation to think about characterizing what would we need, how could we test cars with embedded AI. And so we've been testing Teslas. And one of the things that we've seen in the testing of Teslas is sometimes the cars perform eye-wateringly amazing, but in most cases, the cars are extremely variable. One time the car will be amazing, and the very next time we test the car, it is unsafe. And I think this highlights the issue of the problems, the vulnerabilities that Daniela referenced, the machine learning underneath. You know, how do we get at vulnerability that is a result of the either the underlying inadequacies in the data, or are they the inadequacies of the particular machine learning approach? Are they the inadequacies of how we interpreted those approaches? I think all of those could be potential problems. But even in this Tesla testing, one of the things that we found out is that the sun angle, even the sun angle at which the car is performing a particular test, can potentially lead to very different performance. And if we've got problems with sun angle causing wide variation in behavior, you know, forget about, you know, human variation or much more dramatic variation like potentially rain, snow, other weather conditions. So I think that this issue of complexity, one of the things I find interesting working with engineers is what we think of operating in complex scenarios for ourselves are not the exact same conditions for being complex for an automated system, right? We would never think of operating in different sun angles as providing problems in our own world, but yet I think engineers who are thinking about these problems are missing areas of complexity because they don't consider them complex for our operation, and they forget that systems, autonomous AI-enabled systems, operate on a different set of conditions.
Thanks, Missy. So for my staff colleagues, don't get worried. I'm going to go off script just a little bit here. Danny, if I can put you on the spot, because we've had a set of email exchanges over the last couple of days. Sort of threaded in this whole conversation are precise versus imprecise definitions around things like deterministic and non-deterministic, and determinable and non-determinable, and provable and non-provable. And can you just sort of riff on that for us a little bit? Because I know this is the life you lead, and it's informing the whole conversation we're having here.
Yeah, actually, there's a very natural way to do it using Missy's concept of uncertainty as kind of a jumping off point. Because there are kind of three uncertainties in these systems. One is the uncertainty of the inputs that they're going to be faced with. Another one is the uncertainty of the function that they will do. In other words, how do they actually perform? That's essentially what testing is about. And then the third is the uncertainty of the behaviors that they can produce. So the range of behaviors that they can produce. So basically they're a function that produces a behavior from an input. And so there's three levels of uncertainty. What's the function, what's the input, and what's the output? And so I think that perhaps one of the most useful things that we are going to be able to do is to kind of categorize systems to the degree of uncertainty in a way that's helpful for people to understand how challenging the problem is for testing, and what kinds of techniques, and whether they're well-known techniques or, barely known techniques, or it's known to be impossible. And so I'd suggest that we use those sources of uncertainty to do that. So in a case where, like, take the one where Daniela described, where you use a training set to train an AI system, but then it's fixed. So in that case, you don't really know quite what the function did, but you might know what the range of inputs is and what the range of outputs is. And for example, if it's being used to do quality control on inspection, then you kind of know the range of inputs and then you know the range of outputs. Those systems are relatively easily testable because you can explore the range of inputs and see if you get the appropriate range of outputs. Then I'd say the second category is ones where the systems themselves are adaptive. So that function in between actually changes and it learns with the inputs. And in that case, you can't really explore the range of inputs because it's the entire sequence of everything the machine has seen in the past. And so that's too large to be explored. So that second category of things, you typically approach it by basically sampling some inputs, but exploring the range of outputs and making sure all the outputs are safe and acceptable, but sampling and making sure the inputs cause good responses. So that's a pretty well understood testing methodology. Then the next level of testing methodology would be more like the self-driving car, where you have a very wide range of possible inputs. It might be sun angles, it might be an animal running across the road, it might be things you've never even thought of. And so in some sense, the inputs are unexplorable, but behaviors that you're controlling are very well bounded. The car can steer, it can brake, it can. And so in that kind of thing, there are difficult, but there's begun to be a practice of methodologies for how do you test such a thing. And it's a combination of exploring the input space, but driven from the output space. And so that's a difficult problem, but there are sort of known methods that have at least partially work. So that would be the category 3. Category 4 would be where both of those, both the inputs and the outputs are too large to explore. And so a great example of that was when Microsoft released that Tay chatbot, where they didn't, people talked with it. So they really didn't have a good model of all the things people might say to it. And they didn't have a good model of all the things it might say. And since it learned what they said, after a while, it turned into a sort of obnoxious, racist, because of things people said to it, it became something that they had to decommission immediately because it started having a range of behaviors that were not predicted, but were unacceptable. And so that is, we're now in that domain, we're in that fourth domain, we're in the domain where we really don't have a good proven methodologies for testing. And so we should admit that we don't, and research is required, and we need to approach that. Innovation is required in that area, and so on. And then the final domain may be when we have these true AI systems like DeepMind, or there's lots of them being developed by companies, where the range of behaviors is literally unbounded. So systems that, for example, write computer programs, things like that. And these have been built in academia for a while. I've built some of these, and they truly surprise you in what they produce. Like one example I had of a system that was meant to explore a virtual world and find the best solution to the problem in the virtual world. And the system discovered that it could exploit a round-off error in the floating point chips used to implement the virtual world to effectively gain as much energy as it wanted to. And that's something that certainly the designers of the virtual world never knew about, the designers of the system never anticipated, but it found a behavior that did something surprising. Or in Eurisco, there are systems that learned how to modify their own goals, for example. And so they did things that the designer of the system didn't intend them to at all. And so any system that can, in some sense, produce Turing universal behavior is in principle unpredictable, undecidable. That's what the halting problem is about. So the theoretical reason is to believe that that problem can never really be solved completely unless you bound the behavior. So it's good to know that you're sort of getting into that range of an unsolvable problem. So that I'd put as the fifth category. So I think doing something like that where we give people an idea of the level of difficulty of the problem that they're faced with would be a useful thing that we could do.
Thanks, Danny. Daniela, did I see your hand raised?
Yes, yes. I just wanted to follow up on Danny's comments and make a few observations. I would just like to add that the principles behind machine learning systems function are very different than the principles behind regular software. And one way to think about it at the high level is that the behavior of the system constantly changes. So you have a piece of software, you feed into that piece of software increasingly more data. That piece of software produces logic, which we call a model. That model will continuously change according to the data used to train it. And so, this, I mean, at the high level, this illustrates why there is so much uncertainty, even in what we expect to get from the system. And I want to go back to the self-driving examples you're giving, Danny, and use that example to illustrate how important data is for these systems. In other words, let's say you have a self-driving car and you train it in a city environment, in an urban environment. How will that car do in the cornfields or in the woods? It's not clear that the behavior of the car will be adaptive. And what will that car do if all of a sudden something completely out of the ordinary happens? Let's say you're driving on the road and the plane is coming to do an emergency landing on the road. As a human, you know exactly what to do in that case. But what will the vehicle do? Because the vehicle might have never been given instances of those cases. So the plane landing on the road is an example of what we call corner cases. It's an example of the kind of new behaviors and new types of environments we need to consider when we train machine learning systems. And so this actually points us to maybe some principles that we need to consider in evaluating AI systems. So in particular, creating data sets that have the right structure, that capture the right behaviors, and and pay particular attention to corner cases is super important. And then the training set will be different than the testing set. How will you do that? How will you train, let's say, in an urban environment and test in other types of environments? Also, developing the suite of functions for testing according to the types of uncertainties that Danny alluded to is super important. And then understanding that the results from these systems are not binary, they're not yes, no, statistical. So capturing the statistics, understanding to explain the data is super important.
Thanks, Daniela. I'm going to try and start to wrap us up here because we need to move on to other stuff. But Neil, I think you wanted to make a comment?
I just had a brief reflection on some of what we just heard. Missy, I think you put your finger on the right button there when you noted that in practice, what we accept is good enough, even if we're not actively thinking about the problem in that way. And good enough, if you just tell that to someone, no, I don't, it's not good enough, I want the best. You know, our thoughts and behaviors don't reflect the reality that almost every day of our lives, we're accepting something that's just good enough. But it occurred to me, and I wonder if this is a philosophical issue, a logical issue, but if AI is some extension of what we are as our intellect, making decisions faster, the kinds of decisions we would make, and you train it on scenarios that humans have been in, then of course the AI is going to have bias. It's going to be racist. It's going to be sexist. It's going to have all the same biases we have if it's trained on what we've done. And so I think ideally we want AI to transcend that, but I wonder if in principle that's even possible if we become the foundation on which we're basing the training models. And that's, just want to put that out there.
Yeah, it's a great comment, Neil, and I would say there was a thread of that came up during our AI ethics principles, where we have to ask the question, are we trying to mirror human ethics principles, and are humans ethical, right? So the whole conversation there. So
Right.
Let's see, Richard, I'm going to ask you for comments in just a minute, but Missy, I have one question for you. So for the audience, we've had a number of sessions with AI teams from several industry folks and with AI teams from inside the department. We are going to continue to do that work as we begin to frame it, but Missy, just any general thoughts on what you think we're seeing so far in terms of level of maturity or lack thereof?
Well, I think that we need, I think that the Department of Defense, it would be good for the different agencies to share data with one another so that there could be some lessons learned in terms of who's doing what and what's been tested and what testing methodologies work. I was actually, as a former fighter pilot, I was extremely intrigued and definitely annoyed by the DARPA ACE program, where they claim to have reached a watershed moment in terms of AI outperforming humans. I actually felt like they probably didn't do enough testing to make sure that those claims could be made, but yet at the same time, I think this represents a great opportunity. I have always said, look, that's one of the reasons I left the Navy, is because my days as a fighter pilot were numbered. But when we're talking about having aircraft that are at a minimum $100 million a copy, taken over by computer and engaging in aerial combat, we're talking about risk levels that are quite high and the complexity is quite high. So I actually think the ACE program represents a unique opportunity for all the defense agencies to come together and start forming some test strategies around not just the actual systems, but the simulated systems too. There is a big push right now, and we're about to hear this in digital engineering, to start doing a lot of development digitally, and I'm all for it. But in the end, I think that we need to figure out what the right balance is of simulated testing, and what does that tell us as opposed to actual testing, which is of course much harder to do and much more expensive. So I think we're hearing a lot from the different services, but I think the one common message that I thought we were hearing was that we need to do more to get information across all the different elements of the services.
Thanks. Milo, your hands up?
Yeah, I just wanted to part of what I was thinking about was, if you think about even a weapon system like a fighter plane or something that's more compact, the scope of its impact is fundamentally limited. But in the cyber domain, that's not the bounds of effect are not so easily clear. And I think we need to be very careful about particularly offensive cyber equipped with AIs. We're starting to see activity in that space. We need to be really careful about that, because all of the issues about validation and test in that kind of environment, it's going to be very difficult to do a good job there.
Thanks,
And
Milo.
Missy, just for the record, when DARPA did that study, it clearly didn't baseline against your flight skills.
Richard, I'm going to transition to the other topics, but anything you want to add on this one?
No, I think this has been a great discussion, Michael, and really teases out some of the things that we're looking at. And I'll use this also as a sound check. Can you hear me okay? I got cut off and had to come back in.
We can hear you. Let me just, yes, Richard, we hear you fine. Let me just wrap up for everybody. So what the audience is getting here is sort of standard DIB practice. You know, we're not giving you anything that's all burnished and finalized. You're getting the early stages of our conversation. We actually think that's a really good way to run these kind of projects. So we will continue to update you. Our hope is that we will have 2 documents that come out of this work. One will be sort of a backgrounder document, maybe a little bit more in depth of some of the themes that you heard today, and then ultimately leading to some recommendations around TEV&V. And maybe you heard the hints of a couple of those today, but our objective is to work on this over the next couple of months. In a good world, for our next meeting at the end of the year, December timeframe, we hope to be in a position to read something out to everybody. So I want to thank my colleagues for the good conversation. And with that, Richard, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Michael. I wanted to talk a little bit about some other things we're doing within the S&T subcommittee in the area of digitally enabled design, delivery, and deployment of DoD systems. So I think I count 6, maybe actually 7 Ds in there. And Missy just said development, so I could throw that in there as well. So, but you know, what's really going on in this area of digital engineering and what can we do? And so within the S&T subcommittee, we've been looking at this. And we're at the stage now where we're just kind of gathering information from various individuals, talking to DoD program managers and acquisition executives and implementation leaders to understand how things are currently being done and what's coming, talking to IP experts within the department to understand how they think about digital design, digital engineering, and related concepts, and talking to industry practitioners, what's being done in the commercial sector and how can we build on that. I'd say there are 2 key elements right now in terms of where we're at. One is this area of digital engineering, but the other is sort of thinking about digitally enabled ecosystems for engineering, for design, delivery, deployment of DoD systems. And so I'll say just a little about each of those. On the digital engineering end, what do we mean by digital engineering? This is things like model-based systems engineering, that is digital representations of our systems that we can use for modeling and analysis. Digital threads, where we really think about as you go through that design and development and deployment process, keeping a digital representation all the way through that, as well as digital twins, the role of having a deployed system, but also having a digital twin, a kind of copy of that system that keeps track of what went on in that system, what data do I have from that system, what changes were made to that system. So all of this is under the kind of broad umbrella of digital engineering. This is an area that there's been a lot of activity in industry, but it's not nearly as common in many DoD systems. Some it is, some it's not, but it's really revolutionized, I think, what happens in the commercial world. You see this a lot in areas like consumer electronics, where our speed and ability to take advantage of digital representations of products and get new ideas out there quickly is just, you know, I think really impressive. But even in other areas, rocket systems, and Mark knows about this and others, right, you know, have really taken advantage of digital representations. Will Roper has been a great advocate of this area. He gave a talk earlier today describing his vision, and it really lines up with the directions that we're exploring. So I think already within the department, there are champions for what we're talking about and people pushing on this. The Air Force today announced their E-Series. This is a designation of programs within the Air Force that they're using to kind of label the systems that are being developed with a digital engineering perspective. And so I think as we look forward, we see lots of opportunities. So digital engineering is one part of thinking about this sort of broader area of digitally enabled design, delivery, and deployment of DoD systems. But the other is to think about digitally enabled ecosystems. So how do we go beyond model-based systems engineering, digital thread, digital twin, and look at the way that the technology is managed? So there's a lot of things that can go in here. This can be ideas like design studios, where a small company can design a product but make use of the ability for manufacturing to be outsourced, for example. And you see this a lot, again, in the electronics industry, where there are very well-established manufacturing companies, and you can tie into them in ways that allow you to get a very high reliability product out at scale into consumers' hands. Can we do similar things in the context of the DoD? I think there are also opportunities, not necessarily outsourcing all of those, but looking at more vertical types of structures. But again, digitally enabled vertical structures where you can bring the end manufacturing process up into the design stage and say, we need to design that so that it can be built using additive manufacturing techniques and the constraints that, additive manufacturing, 3D printing allows a huge number of things to be opened up in the design space, but it does have constraints. So how do you reflect those back to the designer in an interesting way? So I think there are lots of different ways to get to digitally enabled ecosystems. And so I think we're starting to look at those and try and understand them. And maybe I'll pause briefly here and ask if others want to kind of chime in on the DIB. And Michael, Kurt, Milo, Missy, Danny, others, you've all been involved with this. So maybe I'll let people go. And I can see the hands raised. And so maybe Daniela, we'll start with you. You're muted, Daniela.
Sorry about that. So I'm very excited about the opportunities in this space because not only do we have the opportunity to use computation to accelerate the process of creating a functional product, maybe going from specifications all the way to a product that is specified according to specification. That's not even necessarily an inert product. That is a product that has some kind of function that we want to achieve. And I would highlight that machine learning and AI is rapidly advancing towards tackling problems like this, where we can do simultaneous design of form and function. And so the opportunities of doing sort of on-demand products and services using these kinds of digital processes is tremendous. I'm also just listening to you, Richard. I'm also really intrigued by the notion of creating a kind of a digital studio or design and fabrication network that's almost like an operating system that will coordinate the entire processes, some of them within a single location, a single factory, but also across production sites. And so I think that would be a fantastic challenge for us. Can we bring in support from digital tools and computation to create this kind of high-level digital coordination that will make everything definitely much faster, much more rapidly, and much more efficiently.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as you say, Daniela, quite eloquently, there's lots of great opportunities there, and what will happen in terms of computation and the use of techniques from AI, machine learning, et cetera, as well as these sort of ecosystems. Kurt, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, just two comments. The first thing is I would say this is another place where industry has already gotten to the point where end to end we think about products as being digital from design all the way to completion. If I think about Surface, for instance, any of the hardware products that we build, they are built that way. And that includes ecosystems all the way back to the device and the component manufacturer. So there's a huge opportunity for us to do the same and figure out a blueprint for how that would work in the DoD, kind of stitching together some of the things that have already been done. The second thing is there's an incredible amount of complexity, as we've discovered so far, in what the problem statement is. You have the problems and you talk to different people and you get a different, it's like the elephant and you feel different parts of it. So we talk about people who are keen around design studios. We talk about others that it's about the interaction between suppliers and the DoD itself. Others, it's about how do I get sustainment of that product or that weapon system over the long time. So I think this is one of those places where either A, you can think of it as a place we could contribute for a long period of time, or B, we should get really honed in on what our problem statement is and how do we phrase the entire space and then what we want to tackle specifically. And then the third thing I'll toss in is, to the extent that you get digital end-to-end, it puts an even higher requirement around securing those assets. Yeah. And you bring in topics around zero trust networking and evolving the security approach that the DoD has as well. So we should think about that piece as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for, let's do Michael and then Milo.
Just real quick, I think just from our preliminary conversation, Richard, I think we're going to end up wanting to parse this whole sort of thought process similar to the way we did the SWAP study, in that there won't be a one-size-fits-all answer, right? I mean, you know, you worry about sort of disaggregating things when, for example, the manufacturing technology doesn't exist and has to be developed along the way. On the other hand, you worry about over-aggregating when there's a million suppliers, all of whom are already supplying to Kurt for pennies on the dollar, versus integrating that into a vertically integrated supply chain. So I think some work in how we parse what the different use cases will be, I think will be important.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Michael. And again, recognizing that not all hardware is the same, just like not all software is the same, which is one of the things that came out of the SWAP study. Milo.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think this is yet another example of software eating everything, right? We're now taking the same principles that we use to accelerate software design, test, integration, and those kind of accelerated product cycles into the hardware domain. And so making hardware be able to evolve as quickly as we can evolve software is going to be a true game changer. The countries that incorporate that first into their systems are going to get disproportionate level of advantage from doing that. So it's really a challenge, both an opportunity as well as a new domain of competition. And I think the key is driving faster cycle times. That's not just in terms of fielding new capability, but also faster understanding of failures, right? If you've got something that doesn't work, understanding why it failed, where the problems are in the hardware design, and being able to change them. And that's got to be accompanied by faster test and evaluation cycles as well. Because if you serialize this process and you don't make the test and validation work quickly, you're not going to get the benefits of this kind of electronic software-driven hardware design.
Absolutely. Thank you, Milo. So, I think maybe I'll wrap this up just so we can kind of keep going through. But I think this is the sort of thing that we're thinking about in the context of this area. And as we move forward, I think we're going to learn a lot about, how do we really increase the speed and agility in fielding DoD systems. I think that's, kind of the key thing that we're trying to get out of this. A lot of the principles that came out of the software acquisition and practices study, I think can be applied to hardware systems, and we need to understand where they can be applied and what the right ecosystem looks like in that kind of digitally enabled way. And that will differ for different types of hardware, just like it differs for different types of software. But these ideas, I think, are something that if the DoD can take advantage of what American industry to be able to do in these areas, I think we can really leverage that kind of expertise that's out there. Not just thinking about that in terms of software and electronics, but thinking about things like rocket engines and airplanes and other things, and understanding when can these be applied and how can they be applied. So I'll maybe stop there on this topic. Michael, I did want to say a couple of other things about what's going on in some of the things related to our past work and interactions with Congress in particular. So two, one is that related to digital engineering, we'll be providing updates on congressionally mandated reports on the Section 231 digital engineering capability to automate testing and evaluation. So the DoD teams made progress in selecting a set of pilot programs. And on the DIB, we look forward to those finalized lists and demos beginning in November that can inform our assessment that we'll be doing. We'll be doing an independent assessment of DoD's progress on promotion of digital engineering capabilities through those activities. In addition, in last year's NDAA, the DIB was tasked to provide an assessment on DoD software development, software acquisition, training, and management programs. These came in part out of some of our recommendations related to the SWAP report. So we reported on this in our last public meeting back in March. A little bit. So last month, the DoD provided Congress with an interim update on the innovative training and workforce initiatives in response to the Section 862 requirements. We did an assessment. So we had an assessment that was due that we needed to talk about in our March meeting. And so we did that sort of in opposite order, as it turned out. But our assessment still stands, and we don't see any significant changes in what we saw. Undersecretary Ellen Lord, her team is continuing to identify the software workforce and competencies, as well as existing software training and potential career paths. Her final report will be delivered to Congress in December, and the S&T subcommittee will then provide an update on our assessment of their final report, and we hope to give an update on where we're at on that in our next public meeting. So that's kind of some of the other things that are going on within the S&T subcommittee. And with that, maybe I'll turn it back to you, Michael, in terms of anything else you'd like to do on S&T. And if not, we can turn it back over to Mark.
I only have one job left, and that's to turn it back to Mark. So thanks, Richard.
Great.
Well, you all have seen the power of having co-chairs on these committees and the wonderful people who've been staffing and working with both Michael and Richard on this. Thank you very much for this, and I really do appreciate the extra help and the support here and the spirited discussion. And I certainly agree with the comment made earlier that it is part of what we do to be able to discuss this openly as it's moving forward. I think it's an important element of what we're trying to do, and all of you who are listening today certainly have heard that. I'd like to turn it over now and welcome Jen Palka to the video conference. She's been in the background. Jen, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Very good. As we move forward, Jen, thank you so much for leading and doing so much work on the Workforce Behavior and Culture Subcommittee. This has become an increasingly important part of what we do, and certainly the opportunities here to affect and help the department have really multiplied, particularly this past year. And I wanted to turn it over to you and for an update, and also for the very important discussion that we're going to be having. Go ahead, Jen.
Thanks so much, Mark. And I agree. I think this is an incredibly important topic. The staff, as you recognized earlier, have done just a fantastic job with it, as well as Adam Grant, the co-chair here. So let's give you a little bit of an update on the Workforce Behavior and Culture Subcommittee. We have been looking at one thing in particular over the past several months, and following on again from Mark's comments earlier, we are at a time where a lot is changing in the world around us. And one of those biggest changes is that people all around the world and all around the country are working from home. So the private sector has sort of turned this from an adaptation to circumstances to more of a strategy. So starting with, how do we adapt to a public health crisis and keep our employees safe while keeping the business active and robust? They're now beginning to see remote work as a way to access new pools of digital talent. So how do we actually use this to our advantage to get the best people for the job? And we were asked to think about what this means for DoD and government-wide, as we also compete to recruit and employ the best digital talent. So as private sector remote work trends are changing how employers compete for digital talent, DoD has the opportunity to take advantage of these trends and be more competitive for civilian talent in this new environment. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Adam, what would you like to add to this?
Thanks, Jen. So I would just add that even before the pandemic took hold, we saw a whole bunch of organizations starting to experiment with remote work. And I will say that a lot of the results were more encouraging than most of us expected. We had call center data showing that when people were randomly assigned to work from home, their productivity went up by 13.5%, and they were half as likely to quit over the next 6 months, in part because they worked longer hours. They were more motivated, they appreciated the flexibility, they reciprocated that with loyalty. We've had evidence that patent examiners, when they're allowed to work from anywhere, actually become more productive, and there's no cost to the quality of their work. And I think now that a lot of us have tried out the remote world, as Jen was saying, this is an amazing opportunity to say, look, there are people that we might want to bring into the Department of Defense that previously we could not have convinced to move on to location. And now the possibility that knowledge work can be done from pretty much anywhere is much more real than it's been in the past. I think it's also worth saying that we don't see major declines in satisfaction when people move to a remote model. That obviously varies a little bit by industry, by geography, by the kind of job they're doing. But overall, people are able to stay connected. They're often able to either stay productive or become more productive. And so this seems like an experiment that it's time to take more advantage of than we currently do.
Absolutely. And actually, I think we're quite pleased to highlight that, in fact, there's a bunch of bright spots like that within our current world here at DoD, and we think that they could serve as a new model for DoD to fill tech talent gaps. So CIO, Kessel Run, Defense Digital Service, Platform One, a bunch of these already bright spots within digital talent in the department are also the bright spots for productivity in this new world. So they have seen productivity and staff able to really deliver on the mission. They're seeing increases in their own productivity. I think that easy to think that the private sector can do things that the public sector can't, but really they're doing a fantastic job too. So we wanted to make sure that people knew about that. We've highlighted those in the paper that came along with this meeting, and also included an addendum of some of the best tools and practices utilized by DDS and Platform One in particular, so that other parts of the department can look at this and use it as a model. So we've really loved hearing about the innovation and culture change in DoD, and we really want to highlight for leaders to consider how to standardize and integrate remote work to enable DoD to recruit and retain remote technical talent. I'd like to invite some of my colleagues. Let's talk about first maybe about perspectives from the commercial sector. Milo, Kurt, Eric, Marnie, I'm going to look to you to go first. And then we want to see what's going on in the universities. So perhaps Missy, Michael, and Richard can chime in once we've talked about private sector's response to this pandemic. Let's see, who wants to start? Marnie, why don't you go ahead and start?
Sure, I'm happy to jump in. I am so glad that we took a look at this, because I think it presents a real opportunity for DoD. Jen, I think you're right that we are seeing companies rethink how to integrate remote work to achieve broader organizational goals and growth. And I expect that we'll see other companies adjusting their long-term policies to leverage remote work for tech, digital talent. And this may be about retention, but it also may be about finding new talent and being able to diversify the workforce. So I can speak a bit from personal experience. At Facebook, we're fortunate that as a tech company, we're set up to be able to get work done and to be able to really to work from anywhere. And so as we build for the future, we're trying to think about how to, as you said, make this a strategy to retain and hire the best people no matter where they choose to live, opening up a pool of untapped talent, which is great. So starting this summer in the US, we began to make remote work available to employees, in addition to hiring new employees to work remotely in our hubs. And what I mean by hubs is that there won't be offices, but we'll sort of designate certain areas that give people a chance to work remotely, like work from their homes, that is their office, arm them with equipment, with budgets and stuff to make that office work for them, but also give them the opportunity to gather with other people nearby to attend important meetings or training sessions and build community. So we're starting in North America in certain metro areas to look at that, and over time I think we'll expand that based on what it is that we learn. There's a couple things that I think have been important, and one is to really keep the goal in mind of what that workforce policy is all about and what you're trying to accomplish. If it's to diversify the workforce, to retain workforce, if it could be about cost cutting too. And it's important to invest in the right infrastructure to support remote work moving forward. And when we think about infrastructure, there are obvious types of investments like the right tech and the right tools like VPN and so forth to work safely and securely even when you're remote. You have to have the right equipment in your home to be productive, or whether it's ergonomic chairs, desk and things like that, because you're replacing the situation. But it's also important that employees feel connected to one another and to leadership. At Facebook, we use our own product. It's a communications tool, Workplace, to be able to collaborate and work efficiently. It allows for asynchronous collaboration and more transparency, open communication across the company. But there's different systems out there to use, but it's important to have one that brings everybody together. And also, importantly, to build that muscle around internal communication. I remember before, internal communications was a small part of my job, and now it is a much bigger part, and you need to be deliberate and intentional when thinking about communication. And then I would just end by saying that I think it's really important to think about a shift in culture and behavior. We go for years building up cultures in organizations. And right now it's very easy because we all work remotely. So everybody's a box on a screen, so to speak. But over time, as you're shifting and you're adjusting to have a more hybrid model where some are working remotely and some are working in offices when people go back to work, you have to be very, again, deliberate and intentional about making that work and shifting culture. For us, I remember when we started growing as a company globally and putting offices other places and having people travel and dial into meetings, we had to actually have people build that muscle of dialing into meetings and then incorporating people who were on the video into the discussion so that you got the best out of everybody. And so really thinking about and planning for these takes time to get it right, but I think there's a real opportunity there.
On mute. And there we have a great example of not using the technology well during a remote meeting. Thanks, Marnie. I think I think we're really encouraging the department to pick up on, I think, all the threads that you just talked about, and particularly to leverage where they are doing that well and the parts of the organization that have started to build that muscle already. Kurt, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, so a lot's been said already, so I want to reinforce everything that's been said already. It applies to the Microsoft example as we went to essentially 100% work from home out of necessity with COVID. And I think that's a critical thing, is basically COVID caused us to have to do it, and then we in industry have found that it actually works. And so we're kind of indirectly setting a new norm in an unexpected way. And there's really probably no going back to this notion that we were at before of the norm is for everybody to go back in the office. And I think that also means that as we change in tech, I think it'll cascade into other industries. And I think that new norm has to be adopted by the DoD just because it is the landscape that they live in today. A few other thoughts. One is it's not just about how you think about working from home. That's only one dimension of the problem as we've seen it. The other dimensions to us that we hear from our employees is, one, I want to have different flexible hours than I've had in the past. That has worked for people. The second thing is the amount of time that you work from home. The actual largest percentage of people or feedback we get is that a fraction of their week is what they want to actually spend at home. And so I think you need to think about what your policy looks like for partial and for those who want to work from home 100% of the time. The third thing is there's locality. And the locality can be, I want to work from home, but in the locality of, for instance, the Pentagon. It can also be, I want to work from a different state, or I actually want to work from a different country as well. And you have to think about all those different scenarios also. A few other things we have found, you have to be proactive as a company in setting the policy for the whole company, but allow for flexibility within different organizations. And managers have to embrace a new way of thinking about how they manage teams. Yeah. You need to send the right message overall for the whole team that, hey, this is okay, as opposed to being the person that says, I want my people close and I'm not going to accept anything else. You have to reinforce that behavior all the time. Like, you don't always come into the office. You make it clear by your example that it's okay for others to do the same. And I also think you have to think differently about evaluation. This isn't the case you can just see everybody all the time and you assess their evaluation by whether they're at the coffee pot, or whether you see them in the hallways all the time. And then the final thing I would say is and I know the paper goes through this really well, is there's a large demand in terms of changing your infrastructure. You have to think about how do you give everybody VPN, a virtual private network, access into your intranet. How you think about removing the intranet over the long period of time to everything being internet-based from the beginning. How you think about collaborative environments like the VCR environment that DoD stood up. And then how do you think about security differently? You do, again, really have to go to this notion of zero trust where everybody's accessing from the internet and think differently about how you secure your environment as a result. But really excited about the paper overall.
Great. Daniela, did you want to chime in here as well? You are on mute, Daniela.
Hi, I just wanted to contribute a bit of a university perspective. First of all, I want to say very excited about the paper and what it communicates. And I wanted to share that at MIT we have been online, so off campus for 6 months now. And I was part of a committee that figured out how we can begin to allow people back to work, because some work truly requires access to specialized equipment. And then how do you do that at a time when it's not safe to move so much? Now, what we have found is the following. So we have found that we put in place policies that keep people safe, and that people actually start coming in. But they report that they're much more efficient about coming in. They do much more planning work at home before they come and they use the special equipment. We also found that people really miss the interaction. And so this notion of running into someone in the hallways and brainstorming is critical to creativity. If you are too isolated, you're less creative, and you are less likely to have out-of-the-box ideas. So that's very important. Also, infrastructure is critical. If you don't have the right infrastructure at home, you will be missing your deadlines, because your connectivity will go down at the very critical point when you have to submit something on time. And this has happened to us a number of times during the summer.
Well, I did go ahead and shift to you, Danielle, in sort of an academic environment without bringing Milo in, but I think everything you talked about is actually relevant in a private sector company as well. Milo, do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, sure. I think part of our experience, because we went to a zero trust model a long time ago. And so because of that, we didn't use VPNs at all, right? People could actually pick up their workstations and from the office and bring them home, plug them into their network and at home and go back to work. And I think thinking through security in this model is really important. There is a temptation to simply say, well, I'm just going to give people VPN and then let them go in. That's not the best way to manage this, because I think the issue about roles, what access to information you're authorized to have, as people change roles, right? We should not. This is going on long enough that people will move in function and role through this outage, through this COVID period. And the ability to have your access controls and what data you're authorized to see change automatically in that as roles change is going to be critical for operating in an extended period of time. And then one other thing I want to talk about is it's not just about the company itself, it's about your partners, it's about your vendors, it's about your contractors and customers, how we interact, how the department interacts with its contractors, its equipment vendors, the defense industrial base, the other DIB, right? That really, the model where I'm going to give information physically or send something in an attachment, that's not going to be a very secure model if everybody's in this distributed model. We need to use digital rights management and other technologies to make sure that the data that's passed around is auditable. We know who's got access to it. We know if people can make copies of it, et cetera. So I think it's really important that we don't think about VPNs as a Band-Aid, right? But we really address the fundamental notion of information security. And that's important even on the unclassed side, particularly in this kind of environment. Auditing, knowing who's accessed what devices, how that maps to your physical location, not as a key, but as a signal, is going to be really important.
And since we're on security, Milo, we might want to note for the audience that we do have one of our recommendations here that kind of brings together a little bit what you were talking about and Marnie's idea of sort of localities, where we do know that, yes, we want to enable unclassified work, but we're also going to have people who are going to be accessing classified information. And we believe that maybe there's an opportunity to make sort of a nationwide network of SCIFs so that you can work remotely, even potentially, in a totally different area of the country, but still have a reasonable way of getting into a SCIF when you need to. And we'll go through those recommendations in a minute. But it's nice to sort of see all these threads come together. Michael McQuaid, did you want to talk a little bit about what's going on at CMU in this regard?
Yeah, just very quickly. The only thing I would just add into the conversation is one of the things we're finding is that that it's not just enough to think about I'm here or I'm there, and particularly in the time of COVID, life can be very complicated at home, and redefining expectations about people's availability and their immediacy and what gets done when, and when people are doing work versus not doing work. There's a whole range of stuff that goes on here. So you can't just sort of say, well, I was, working with my earpods in a big open environment in the office, and now I can just go home and do that at home. We really do need to think about how we provision at home and how we set expectations for people that are working at home. So I think that's all part of it. And I think that shows up in the report too. So.
Yes, and much has been said about equity issues in that regard as well as some changing norms that I think are healthy. I'm going to call Adam out for getting a glimpse of one of his kids walking in the background, which I think is one of the wonderful new norms of this world. Sort of a bright spot. Adam, in fact, anything that you want to add?
Yeah, I would just say one thing we haven't talked enough about as a group is analyzing the type of job and how easy it is to go remote. So one of the better models of interdependence we have that just helps people think about how much they have to collaborate to get their work done is distinguishing between pooled, sequential, and reciprocal interdependence. Say that 9 times fast. So pooled interdependence is basically like you're playing baseball. Everybody can work pretty independently. And I think it's pretty easy to make those jobs go remote. If you move to a sequential model, it's a little bit more like an assembly line or a football game, where you're going to hand documents or services or products from one person to another. And we have to think a little bit more about how to coordinate. And I think the hardest kinds of jobs to move to a completely remote model are the reciprocally interdependent, which look more like a soccer game or a basketball game, where there are going to be lots of touches or lots of eyes on whatever the work is. And I think that we've done much better at adapting norms for those first 2 categories than the last. And I think a framework like this might be helpful moving forward.
That's fantastic. It's fascinating. All right, I'm going to wrap it up here. I want to, before we move on, note that the paper looked exclusively at these civilian technologists or civilian digital talent. While the subcommittee very much believes that remote work should be expanded across the DoD, that was our focus, on the people with highly specialized skills in digital technologies and innovations. So hopefully this can become broader overall. But let me just share with the audience the 5 major recommendations in the paper, which you can read on innovation.defense.gov. Number 1 is the DoD should preserve IT upgrades and tools. And so Marnie, I think, started on this topic, but we all mentioned it. There was a fantastic job getting the capabilities in place in a total crisis, and we just really want to maintain that momentum. Let's not decide, the DoD should not decide when and if this crisis is ever over to scale back. Those tools are critical to work and to productivity and to digital strategy. Also to track, measure, and set benchmarks to preserve and enhance those capabilities and tools, continue to make them available. Basically, the tagline on talent and recruiting and the CIO's role is if you build it, they will come. That past crisis has certainly shown that, and the advantages of it are really significant. Our second recommendation, DoD should enable classified work from home. We just spoke about this a little bit. You're going to need some kind of nationwide network of SCIFs, that's sensitive compartmented information facility. For anybody on the call, I'd be shocked who didn't know that. But so for remote staff, can you access them? Can you kind of hotel in them? I think we've talked about this idea of like a WeWork for SCIFs. This is also an area where identity management and zero trust are going to have to play a really key role. Our third recommendation, the DoD should capture lessons learned and standardize and streamline effort to recruit and retain civilian digital talent. DoD is already doing remote work, and some of the organizations in the DoD are doing it very well, some of the ones I just mentioned, which we hold in very high regard for their digital capabilities already. Let's identify and understand what that is, why that's happening so well there, capture those lessons, those best practices, see how they might apply to other organizations or help address issues in a new or different way. Let's also, got a little background noise there. The National Security Commission on AI will also be looking at recruiting digital talent, and we look forward to those recommendations. The DoD should also think about hiring a digital people officer. This is actually following a recommendation that we made in March, and that person could help oversee this effort. Our fourth recommendation is that DoD needs to change the culture around remote work. Many of you mentioned this in the conversation, but it's really important that leaders model the culture change from the top down, not that it is just sort of memos that are sent out with expectations. People will do it if they see others doing it, if they particularly see their supervisors and other leaders in the organization doing it, whatever that might be, but all the norms that need to be created for this stuff to work. Performance no longer equals presence. Of course, as you said, it's not about being seen at the water cooler anymore. DoD should consider how to maintain a mission and outcome-oriented, engaged office culture with hybrid or fully remote teams. And I think I speak for the whole board when I say this is a great example where this is not just about adapting to a crisis. This is about what the department needs to do anyway, and let's use the crisis for some good. And our last recommendation, number 5, and Richard, this one's for you, start small and iterate. We think the DoD should set up dedicated pilot programs to fill tech talent gaps at priority organizations to hire remote talent. Let's take that action. Let's learn, adjust, refine, and then keep going. I think that sounds like pretty much everything I've ever said in the course of my time on the Defense Innovation Board, and I'm not ashamed of it. It's always good advice. Thank you. Let's see, before I turn over to my colleagues for further discussion, I'd like to mention that the subcommittee believes that the DoD is really at an inflection point for talent management. Emerging remote work trends offer the department new opportunities to recruit tech talent from different and diverse locations. And of course, if DoD can't quickly adapt to these changes, the reality is that we risk running further behind, and the ability to compete for top tech talent remains the thing that I want most for the Department of Defense, and I think we all want most. So this really is an incredibly important moment, I think, for the department. Again, not just to adapt, but to really take this energy, move it forward, and do all the things that we need to do to have the talent base that the DoD so desperately needs.
So Jen, thank you, and Adam, thank you for leading this effort, and to the whole committee. It's certainly just hearing the brief comments we've heard today and all the work that represents behind the scenes. It's been an amazing amount of work in such an important time and such an important topic. I think at this point we're ready to call the vote on this, if that's okay with you, Jen.
I think that's great.
Colleen?
Great. Yes. Hi. So I have most of you on the screen. So why don't we'll do a little adaptation here. Raise your hand if you're for it. And then Missy, Neil, and Drew, I will need a vocal from you. So would like to vote on the recommendation for talent?
I'm doing it both digitally and physically.
And that's right.
Aye.
We're back to school again, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Aye.
Excellent. And Drew?
Yes, aye.
Fantastic, great.
And if you raised your hand and mailed in your ballot, it only counts once.
Yes. Thank you, Colleen.
Excellent.
Michael, did I see you join us here?
I did, yes.
Yes, hi. We'll move over to you and then we'll finish the meeting if that's okay, Mike.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited to join. As I'm looking.
Before you go, let me do a proper introduction. You deserve
Absolutely.
it. So I just wanted to say thank you for joining us and for coming on board. Michael Kratios is now as the acting Undersecretary for Research and Engineering. He has come from a long and interesting career, starting his life out in Columbia, South Carolina, going to Princeton, and after spending some time in business and finance and industry, moved over to become the Deputy Assistant to the President when the President took over a number of years ago. Since then, he's also been really involved in innovation and technology, and really, I think of the number of things I saw that you did, one of the things that were most interesting was hosting the American Leaders in Emerging Technology. I thought that was a terrific event, and the work that came out of that was very groundbreaking. About a year ago now, it seems like maybe 10 years ago, you were confirmed by the Senate, I believe unanimously, to be the 4th CTO for the United States, Chief Technology Officer, and has been doing that work for the past year, and just recently took over, I believe, as double duty in his active capacity. So, Michael, thank you so much for not only just joining us today, but in your short time with us and with me, all the support and the work that you've done to continue to help the Defense Innovation Board and make the department move forward. And certainly the administration, from everything we've seen, has been quite focused in on innovation and promoting U.S. leadership in innovation. So I'll turn it over to you. Thanks.
Yeah, my comments will be brief. I know you guys have had a long meeting, but as a starter, just looking on the screen here, I see so many familiar faces: Daniela, Jen, Adam, everyone. It's great. It's great to have to see familiar faces. We've all sort of been tackling this issue of American leadership and innovation for a long time, and it's something that I've been excited to be part of the last few years. I want to sort of begin, obviously, by thanking Eric for your incredible service in carrying forward the DIB from its inception to today. As standing up new organizations are very tricky, whether it's undersecretariats like R&E here at DoD, or whether it's even boards like the DIB. It's not trivial to find a way to chart a path forward and be influential. And what you guys have been able to accomplish, or this board has in such a short period of time, is truly incredible. So congratulations, Eric, and Mark. Thank you so much for everything you've done. I very much look forward to your chairmanship and all that's to come in the years and months ahead. A little bit on my background. I think Mark sort of mentioned it. I spent almost 7 years in Silicon Valley before coming out to Washington to join the administration. And, I have spent a lot of time there, prior to making the move, watching firsthand how government can often play a very important and big role in helping or hindering innovation. Adam Thayer always has this sort of dual tracks of technology that many of you have heard him talk about. Technology born in captivity and technology that's born free. And part of a lot of the efforts that I've undertaken over the last couple of years with my team has been, one, to look at technologies that are born free, things like the internet and so on, and find ways to make sure that we continue to allow innovation and growth in those particular domains like the digital economy. And technologies that are sort of born in captivity are sort of technologies like commercial UAS or autonomous vehicles, or it may be where some kind of government action is required in order to get that innovation going. And as I've been thinking a little bit, or actually a lot, over the past couple of months about sort of the Defense Department and ways that we can spur innovation here, I think that model in some ways works, and we have a lot of innovation here that can be captured forward in our sort of defense industrial and defense innovation base, but creating the right pathways and the right rules of the road, if you will, here at the department to make those a reality are very important. And you guys have spent a lot of time and energy thinking about those issues, and I am very much aligned in kind of the path going forward. To me, I think one point that I did want to make, and something that stood out to me, is those of you who sort of tracked the White House tech agenda. Artificial intelligence has been a big piece of the president's set of priorities. First administration history to prioritize machine learning and AI as a R&D priority for the nation. Signed the executive order establishing the first national strategy for AI. President committed to doubling AI R&D over the course of the next 2 years. So I mean, we've made some incredible efforts, and I think one thing that was a huge compliment and was a big part of a larger administration effort has been the AI ethics that you guys worked on as a board, and it's the type of work that can only be uniquely done by boards like yourselves. And I would posit that if the DoD attempted to internally undertake a process to generate those principles, all of us, I think, could agree it probably would not have worked out very well. And instead, what we had was a very well-run process that you guys had that included sort of very robust stakeholder engagement from across the country, and very thoughtfully put together something to ensure and kind of show that the U.S. is going to continue to lead the world in kind of how we approach these emerging technologies. And huge kudos to that. And when I'm starting to think a little bit with Mark about the types of projects that the DIB can work on in the coming years, that one always is kind of front and center in my mind. It's like, what can the board offer the Defense Department that Defense Department itself can't do on its own? And that was a huge, very successful example, and it's making sort of waves globally. I mean, I think it's really set the tone for the way the militaries are thinking about these issues, and as you know, in the next coming weeks, you'll see some international flavored events around these. So to me, I think I think there's a lot of work to be done, and I'm excited to join with Mark in helping sort of shape the direction of the board as we move forward. To me, I think it's critical that all of you brilliant folks have an opportunity to weigh in and help bureaucrats like me make sure that we're doing the right thing. So I'm deeply excited to kind of work with the board over the next couple of months and years, and I think it's going to be an exciting path forward. So thank you so much for your time, and Mark, I'll turn it back to you.
Very good, Michael. Thank you for joining us today and for helping us get on to the next phase of our time together. We really appreciate it. And as you said, we'll be putting together the agenda for the next coming year, and we'll sit down with you and talk to you about it and how we might be able to work together and make sure the priorities are met. I appreciate the time today.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
All right. Bye-bye now. So as we, now that we've had the chance to hear from Michael, we wanted to finish up the board meeting with just a couple more things. One is that as you've heard today, we've had 2 committees speak. These have been standing committees of the board for a while now, and I'm very happy to say that we're standing up a 3rd committee, and that is a 3rd committee of the Defense Innovation Board called the Space Advisory Committee. Back in April this year and May of this year, as the DoD was standing up the Space Force, it became clear to the Office of Secretary that additional help might be needed. And Deputy Secretary Norquist, after a bit of deliberation and discussion internally, decided that the best way to handle this was to ask the DIB to stand up a dedicated space committee. That committee was then empowered and stood up in May. And really what we think it is, for the most part, is to be able to provide independent advice on strategic challenges that are facing the department. Space is one that is living the last couple decades of my life in it. Many people look at the rockets or the spaceships or the satellites, and that's what they see. But space has become so much more these days. The idea of cybersecurity, the idea of imaging, the idea of being able to understand how the DoD moves forward and protects our interests, the United States' interest, and those of our allies in space. And that goes beyond the hardware, that goes beyond the technology and moves into many different areas that we think the members of the DIB as it currently stands and the new members that will be coming on board to join the committee, Space Advisory Committee, will be very uniquely positioned to be able to support and assist. I'd like to also do a bit of a shout out to General Raymond and Major General Kreider from the United States Space Force. They have really reached out to us very early on in this process and indicated how important they thought it would be for the DIB to be engaged and for our relationship to be one that's symbiotic and constant. And it really has been a great start for us, and I wanted to thank them. It's not an easy thing to do, to stand up a completely new service, and I think they're going from less than 100 people to something like 18,000 people in a year, and those of us who build up businesses understand what that means. But more than just the people, and more than just the challenges, the recognition how important this is going to be in the future is really becoming very well understood within the department. So from that position, we have reached out and we've begun to staff the committee. We will have our first meeting here very shortly, and it will then become part of the DIB. And as we go forward in future DIB meetings, we will hear updates from the Space Advisory Committee. So before we end the meeting, I wanted to just do one more thing, which is last but not least, but probably most important. And Colleen, I wanted to do a thank you to you and your team. It's difficult to do what we're trying to do in normal times, but with all the changeover of the people, with the department not working in normal capacities, I think less than half capacity, without even being able to get to your offices, with a number of new staff people coming on board, you and your team have done an amazing job in the last number of months, just not only keeping us afloat, which would have been a big enough challenge, but dealing with change in chairmanship with me, but really just moving us forward and establishing a new committee and getting very important reports, as you just heard in the last couple of hours. So I can't see all your people, Colleen, but I wanted to, through you, say thank you to you and the team for the amazing work that you did under the most trying of circumstances. I certainly appreciate it on behalf of all the board members. I know we all do. So I think at that point, unless Colleen, there's anything else that you want to go over, I think we've reached the end of the agenda for the meeting, and we have a little bit more time, and I'll turn it back over to you. And thank you to all of our board members for taking the time today and for supporting me and supporting this process. It really means a lot. And as you've heard, I think even with all the changes, we continue to move forward and do tremendous work for the department. So with that, Colleen, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Mark. This has been a wonderful meeting. Thank you so much for all your patience and helping us get this set up. Thank you, Mark, for your kind words about the team. They are an absolute rock stars. And so I know they're watching and plugged in and doing a million things to help make sure that this meeting kind of went off flawlessly. So thank you to everyone there. It's always an honor, I think, for all of us to be able to work with individuals like yourself, Dr. Schmidt, and the entire board to help bring in that expertise and that insight that can help make and affect change in the department. And so I think I've mentioned before, I'm constantly humbled to be in this position and super excited about where we can help drive change across DoD. So I think that is all we have. So if I could, I would like to thank all of you for joining. It was so wonderful to see you. I love looking at this screen here and seeing everyone in their natural habitats. And with that, we will let you all go. And that concludes our Defense Innovation Board Fall Public Meeting and this live stream. So thank you all.
Thanks.